Everyone, we're going to go through primary productivity in this video really quick. Let's get going. So 1.8 is primary productivity. Our objectives, or our learning objectives and essential knowledges are listed here. So the learning objective is explain how solar energy is acquired and transferred by living organisms. So this is a basic concept explanation. What you should be able to do from primary productivity is just explain what's happening in it. A little bit of data analysis is going to be helpful as well, but we're going to do a lab on primary productivity, so stay tuned. The data analysis part will come, but right now I want you to just be able to explain what primary productivity is, and you will get a couple equations, and you should be able to calculate those equations. Not very hard equations, I promise. So the first essential knowledge is that primary productivity is the rate at which solar energy, or sunlight, is converted into organic compounds via photosynthesis over a unit of time. So that's the definition of primary productivity. The rate that solar energy, so the rate that the sunlight that the plants take in, is able to be converted into organic compounds because of photosynthesis over a period of time. So that unit that we're going to use for primary productivity is kcal per meter squared per year. That's going to be our average, our normal unit. You might see us use days instead when we're doing our lab, because we're going to do primary productivity. It's like a 2-part lab, and you'll do it for 48 hours or 2 days or whatever, and you're going to use days instead of years, and then so days will be changed out with years, but that's more in the future. So the kcal is our energy. Meter squared is obviously our area, and then the time is the year. So this is the rate that photosynthesis occurs in all of the producers and all of the plants in a given area over a given period of time. Since photosynthesis leads to growth, you can also think of primary productivity as the amount of plant growth in an area over a given period of time. So when plants are going through photosynthesis, they're trying to convert it into energy, and oftentimes they use a lot of that energy themselves. They use all that energy themselves to help them grow. They need energy to grow, believe it or not. Just like we need energy to grow, we need food to grow, so do plants. A high productivity means high plant growth, which means lots of food and shelter for animals. The taller the tree can grow, the more branches that there are, the more places there are for the birds to live, the more food there is to eat off of the ground, the more fruit that something can produce, the more available to all the other organisms that use that plant. So a high primary productivity means that there's lots of plant growth, which means lots of resources for other animals. Can I move this? I don't know if you guys can see this. I don't know why this is here. Ecosystems with high primary productivity usually have a much more diverse species. There's a lot more diversity in that area than ecosystems with low primary productivity. So we have 2 essential knowledges here, and we're talking about energy in these essential knowledges. So our second essential knowledge is gross primary productivity is the total rate of photosynthesis in a given area. So these are all basically definitions that we're going to go over. I'm going to leave these here for you to view, but I don't think you should worry too much about knowing this as long as you know what's on the PowerPoint. So respiration loss, or RL, is plants use up some of the energy that they generate via photosynthesis by doing cellular respiration. So on, what day is it? On Tuesday last week, we talked about how plants have to do cellular respiration as well. It's a common misconception that plants only do photosynthesis, where they actually do cellular respiration because they're using that sugar that they used, or they're using the sugar they created through photosynthesis to help them grow for movement and internal transportations, because they have to transport water all the way up from their roots to their tops of their flowers, or all the way up from their roots to the top of the tree. They have to do cellular respiration so that they can use that energy to complete those tasks. So RL is respiration loss. I like to think of RL as the tax that the plants needs to pay. And then gross primary productivity, so GPP, is the total amount of sun energy so the total amount of light that the plant captures and converts into glucose through photosynthesis. So that is how much sunlight does it take in and how much glucose does it produce. This is like the total paycheck. If any of you have jobs, you know what your hourly rate is, or not many of us are salaried at this point. I don't think any of us would be salaried at this point, but you know what your total paycheck is going to be because you know how many hours you worked. And so your total amount of energy that you produce, your total amount of money that you made is your gross primary productivity. For the plant, this is the total amount of energy converted from the light. So that's the total amount that it made. And then the respiration loss are those taxes that you pay out of your paycheck for federal and state and Medicare, Medicaid, Medicare, I don't remember which one it is, are those taxes that are taken out so that, you can continue to live because you use the roads, right? So you need to pay taxes on the roads. So the gross primary productivity is the total amount. If you make $10 an hour and you work 100 or 10 hours, you make $100. But then you have to pay a little bit in taxes and respiration loss so that you can continue to live. So net primary productivity is the amount of energy or biomass left over for the consumer, so the thing that eats the plant, after the plant has used some for respiration. So think of NPP as the actual amount that the plant's paycheck is after that taxes are taken out. So NPP is that amount that you actually see in your check. So GPP is I made $100 because I make $10 an hour and I worked for 10 hours this week. I made $100. Respiration loss is what's taken out so that you can continue to live, you can continue to grow. And then the net primary productivity is what you actually see and what you can put into your bank account. That's kind of what it is for the plant. But in terms of plant, so gross primary productivity is the energy that's taking in and converting it into sugars. And then it's taking away a little bit through respiration loss so that it can grow. And then net primary productivity is what's left over in biomass after the plant has used some of it. So the NPP is the actual amount of the plant's paycheck that it keeps after taxes. So as we can see, so photosynthesis comes in and respiration leaves some of the energy and some of it goes to growth and reproduction. Ecology efficiency. I hate this. I don't like this recording app. Not very much, at least. The portion of incoming solar energy that is captured by plants and converted into biomass. So this is the NPP. This is how much you're putting into your bank account for food available to consumers. So what this diagram over here is showing is this is the amount of sunlight that's coming. 100% of the sunlight is coming down to Earth, right? 99% of the energy is reflected or passes through the producer without being absorbed. So that means 99% of all of the sunlight is not being absorbed by that plant. Everything, all the sun that hits the plant is not necessarily being absorbed by the plant. And 99% of it kind of just bounces off, goes away, isn't used, whatever. Another 1% of that solar energy that's striking the producers is captured in photosynthesis, is captured in GPP. So that's how much it's actually taking in and converting into energy. And 60% of GPP is lost to taxes or respiration. And then 40% of it supports the growth and reproduction. And then that's the NPP. So generally only 1% of all incoming sunlight is captured and converted into GPP via photosynthesis. Of that 1%, so 40% of that 1%, so 0.4% of the total incoming solar energy is converted into biomass. It's converted into fruit for those plants to eat. So 0.4% of the total incoming energy is converted into plant growth. NPP is what they can put into their bank account. Some of the ecosystems are more efficient and have higher NPP than others. So some plants are better at taking in energy and using it wisely than other plants. The more productive a biome is, the wider the diversity of the animal life it can support. So higher productivity equals higher biodiversity. So if we can try and predict the most and least productive terrestrial biomes based on their biodiversity, what would you think is going to be the most productive biome that there is? What's the most biodiverse biome? Well, the most biodiverse biome is the rainforest. So obviously water availability, high temperature, nutrient availability are also factors that lead to the amount of productivity that it produces. But when we're looking at biodiversity and its relation to productivity, biodiversity goes up a lot in those items. So in the video that we watched in class on aquatic biomes, we had aquatic biomes and terrestrial biomes. They told us a little bit about the different number one biodiversity, the leading biomes in biodiversity, and those were swamps and marshes and the tropical rainforest, as well as the coral reefs and salt marshes. Those were our number one biomes that had the most amount of diversity. And guess what? It also has the most primary productivity as well. So you can see the correlation between primary productivity and biodiversity. If there's a shortage of any of the three factors that lead to a decrease in NPP, that means it's going to have a lower amount of productivity. So an example of desert, it has low water and low nutrient availability, so it's going to affect the productivity of the plants. And you can see that the desert is pretty darn bad at primary productivity. And we know that the desert is also one of the least biodiverse biomes that there is. The tundra is also a really low biodiversity, really low net primary productivity, and like the link is still there. Low biodiversity, low means low productivity. High biodiversity means high primary productivity. Maybe I should be saying that the opposite way. High primary productivity means high biodiversity, because that's what leads to the biodiversity, is the high primary productivity. And then the open ocean is also really low because of obviously limiting factors like the sunlight. And then last but not least, you guys have this practice FRQ. It's in Google Classroom. This is on your checklist of items to do. Make sure this gets done. It states, describe the process of net primary productivity, and then describe a relationship between primary productivity and biodiversity. I hope these are simple answers for you. I mean, you should probably have a total of 3 to 4 sentences total for this whole FRQ. Make sure you get a great explanation and as concise as you possibly can. Thank you.